Hello, friends. It's Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle and Joy, and I've seen almost nothing.
And we are coming to you today from our movie night,
Woohoo!
Where we have decided, how do I put this succinctly? So,
continuing with the theme of Danielle has seen nothing.
Yes. We are taking advantage of our summer hours for this particular during season 2. Danielle and I will be having occasional movie nights on alternating weeknights. Mm-hmm. And Fringe will be back next week. But for tonight, we're actually going to be talking about Fear.com, which I made Danielle watch.
Yes, for the first time.
What'd you think?
What did I think? Do we summarize it first?
Yes, no, I'll summarize it first. So, okay. So, Fear.com is a film that came out in 2002. It is a movie starring Stephen Dorff, who you might know from Blade in 1998, Natasha McElhone, I think. Apologies.
Got nothing.
And who I personally know from Truman Show, but the audience might know from Solaris and Ronin. And Stephen Ray, who, man, I've seen him in V for Vendetta. He is probably better known for The Crying Game, a film that has not aged well, but, nonetheless, it exists in the lexicon of LGBT.
You know what? I'm actually currently watching a show that he's in.
Really? Which show is that?
Counterpart. Don't know if you've heard it or seen it. I'm really enjoying it.
I have not. That's awesome. Maybe we'll see when it's done. Maybe we can bring it onto the podcast and take a look at it.
It's done. It's capped at 2 seasons. I'm almost done with season 2. So
we'll put it on the list.
Put it on the list.
But yes, Stephen Ray is one of my favorite actors. I actually really enjoy watching him most of the time.
Most of the time. Not when he's torturing young women.
Not when he's torturing young women. That's a bit of a turnoff, as they say. The story is by Moshe Diamant, and it is written by Josephine Coyle and Holly Payberg-Torohia, and directed by William Malone, who also directed House on Haunted Hill, which maybe at some point we'll also watch. That features Jeffrey Rush and a couple other actors. It's a very 90s horror movie in the same way that, like, I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream. Like, it's very...
You're referencing so many things, Joy. You're referencing so many things that
Scream? You've never seen Scream?
I've never seen anything that you've just mentioned. Wait, though, for the listeners, let me qualify. Yes, I have seen nothing. I acknowledge that I've not even touched the breadth of TV and movies that is available in the universe. But I especially have not seen horror films.
I mean, to be fair, that's actually true. I do know that about Danielle, that horror is not your genre. And I respect that. And we have also had the conversation where, like, if I ever overstep the line and I want to suggest too many horror movies, you have full veto power to be like, it's too many horror, leave me alone. The plot is... It's
a revenge movie in disguise.
Yes, it is a horror movie ghost film built as a revenge film. Yeah.
I think that's it. I think you did it. That is the movie in a nutshell.
That's the movie in a nutshell.
Okay, now that I've had a moment to think about it, my feelings on the movie are it gets a resounding sideways thumb.
It's not good. It's not bad. It just exists.
It's not great. It wasn't terrible. If you asked me to watch it with you again, because I know you love this movie and you just wanted to hang on a Wednesday night, I would absolutely watch it again. But I would never, on a Wednesday night by myself, a few drinks in, decide that this is how I wanted to spend my evening.
And you know what? That is a totally fair criticism. I will say the critics did not like this movie. This got panned very badly. I think it didn't do well. It opened against some other pretty big blockbusters, and it felt like no one liked this movie. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is my favorite horror movie, but I did enjoy a lot of it. Like, I like what the storyline was trying to tell you. I like the aesthetic of the film, even though I know it's super dark and you can barely see half of it. But and as you know, my favorite film, which is Dark City, is also a noir detective drama.
Okay.
And I feel like I fell sort of backwards into this noir detective horror movie trope when I didn't even realize it. And I'm like, wait a minute, do I just like noir horror movies? Like, I had to have this come to Jesus moment like 5 years ago where I was like, wait.
Okay, so you like that this is a noir detective story. Which
I like that it's a noir detective
which
story.
part of the story did you like? The kind of the revenge bit of it?
I like the paranormal aspect.
Okay.
The paranormal aspect of the story is honestly what compels me to the story in the first place. If this wasn't for example, Dark City, which I just mentioned, is a science fiction noir story. This is a horror genre noir story. Arguably sort of on the science fiction cusp because we deal with the internet and like energy and like, but it falls squarely in the horror genre, just the same way that Fringe season 1 would fall squarely in the horror genre also.
100%. So if the movie had, in fact, just been about a serial killer, it would not have been appealing to you.
I probably would not have enjoyed it as much as I did. A perfect example of this is a movie like Primal Fear, where have you seen Primal Fear?
Nope.
Okay.
Have I?
Danielle was just nodding, and I was like, she is nodding because she doesn't recognize.
Just nod.
I was like, oh no, she's just nodding. She hasn't heard of this at all. So
the inside scoop is I've seen Dark City, which you were just referencing, because you showed it to me. So
I sure did.
No, I have not seen Primal Fear.
Thing I did. So here's the thing about something like Primal Fear. Primal Fear is just straight up about a dude who murders a priest. Is a former altar boy, murders a priest. It is a little bit whodunit because this altar boy has a very calm, quiet demeanor.
Okay.
This was also the first time I saw Ed Norton, by the way. And I was just like, who is that? Like, fresh-faced baby Ed Norton. It's like Ed Norton and Richard Gere.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a famous actress in it as well, but I'm blanking on her name. But it deals
Laura
with
Linney.
Yes, thank you.
Which
I love that
I'm very clearly on the IMDb page.
You always have the IMDb ready to be like, oh, actors I know and like. There we go. I have a talking point.
Oh, look, Frances McDormand is also in it.
Oh, yes. I mean, I literally love everyone in that movie. But the thing about that movie is it pulls me in because of the twist at the end, which I don't necessarily want to spoil for you. Maybe we'll end up watching it in one of these movie nights. Who can say? But it also isn't something that I come back to a lot. I'm just like, wow, that twist was really cool. Like, I didn't watch this as much as I watched, say, Fear.com or Dark City or these other ones. I think it is the paranormal or the extra bits that something beyond your current understanding than just a detective drama. And I'm sure I can just hear my father in my head being like, but the detective drama should be enough. And it's like, but it's not, Dad. I need something extra.
Sometimes it just isn't. Sometimes it
just isn't.
Cockroaches to come bursting out of the upholstery, you know?
Oh my God, wasn't that the worst? Also, can I tell you, I think, so Fear.com also is one of those things where like it is a ghost story about a ghost who is trying to get her point across to people who come across this website where she's like, this is how I was murdered. This is where I was. This is where I am. Somebody find my body and somebody avenge my soul.
Yes.
The reason that appeals to me, not just because there is something inherent, I think, in female revenge movies that I'm just like, yeah, go get him. But there is something personally in my own brain that really wants to be able to like, especially with ghost stories, wants to be able to give the benefit of the doubt to a ghost that doesn't necessarily know how to get their point across because they're not human anymore. They can't understand the human condition anymore. And they are just rage and they are fire.
Yeah.
And the people she infects with her own pain experience their own pain and somehow have to fight through it to help her. And the only one who can do that is another woman, which I appreciated, which is how you know this was written by two women, but also fell into a bunch of other tropes.
I feel like Mike kind of fights through the pain a bit.
I feel like Mike tries. There was a whole moment where I wrote down, okay, so we're not going to do a full summary because the plot is bonkers.
Yes.
We'll
just talk in circles around it.
Honestly, if the conversations we've been having about the female torture in Fringe have bothered you, maybe skip fear.com and just listen to us talk about it.
It's going to be a hard pass on this movie for you. It's
going to be a hard pass.
If you would prefer not to see someone, I don't know, philosophizing as they violently undress women that they are about to torture, if that's something you're not here for, do not watch this movie.
So should we just talk about Alistair Pratt? Because, oh my God.
Yeah, sure.
Alistair Pratt is such a, let's just get this out of the way. Alistair Pratt, which is funny because it's like my least problem with the movie is like, oh, look, a bad guy just being a bad on screen. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have a whole lot of reason for it. He's just bad. And honestly, those are always my favorite villains because it's like sometimes you don't need a reason to be a terrible person.
Right.
Sometimes you're just a terrible person.
Sometimes you're just a terrible person. And they do sneak in that little comment about how he doesn't feel things. So I guess he's a, quote, sociopath. But
I know. I had that thought, too, where I was just like, like, at least it was like, yeah, so he was kicked out of medical school. But he didn't make that I was kicked out of medical school and now I torture people. Like, hey, maybe he's just a horrible person. Also, I was like, how are you funding yourself as a person when you are constantly wanted by the police?
He lives in the cooling pipe? He lives in the cooling pipe of a steel mill. And
that's true. He doesn't have any overhead. He doesn't pay rent. he just goes for a swim every once in a while.
Mill. Where does he get all the chemicals and gadgets? How did he pay for the domain name fear.com.com, by the way?
No, okay, so here's one of the things that this movie does.
The ghost did that, actually.
So there are two different websites. Fear.com.com, which is hilarious to me, which literally just means the ghost couldn't get the rights to fear.com. So the ghost got fear.com.com. Literally spelled out FEARDOTCOM.com. Like, it is ridiculous.
When Mike is very painfully, while shot in the chest, picking this out one letter at a time at the end of
his two-finger type. With his two-finger typing as he's dying of a gunshot wound. Yeah. Yeah. I loved that moment. I think I even wrote that down. Two-finger type. I also wrote down pour one out for Sykes.
Oh, Sykes, I know. I mean, not that I liked him, but still, did he deserve that?
Poor Sykes. I do think 2002 was like this era of you needed a cop, needed a partner who was relatively useless. This was usually on television. Whenever there was a cop drama on television, it's like, you've got a partner who's pretty useless. Here we go. And it was this weird, like, Sherlock Holmes, not Sherlock Holmes thing where it's like, everyone needs a Watson who's useless when Watson isn't useless.
Just like waves donuts under your nose now and then.
Yeah, like, it's, oh boy. I felt bad for Sykes, but in the way that you feel bad for someone who kind of didn't get a fair shake anyway.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of true for a lot of these characters that they didn't.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't get the I feel like they didn't get the attention they really needed. And I want to blame that so I've done some research, very minimal research on this film, trying to see, you know, sort of where it went wrong, because it did get really panned by critics. And everyone I knew was kind of like, yeah, whatever, that movie's fine. this movie won like worst picture of 2002 and like
so it was just like everyone's toilet paper for a while.
Yeah. And I don't know why. Like I don't think it's that bad. Like
and there's
it has
so many terrible movies out there. You know,
right?
like any given year there are worse movies than this.
Like I think Master of Disguise also came out in 2002. So you're telling me this movie was worse than Master of Disguise, which I didn't even see.
I was going to say like you tell me, Joy.
For some reason this movie was everyone's like punching bag. And I don't know why. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that good. Like, you had an Academy Award nominated actor in this, and Stephen Ray, and for some reason, he is playing this, like, caricature of a bad guy, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's a direction issue. I don't know if it's a script issue. Like,
you didn't think he sold you on his idea of intimacy and how to create that?
Oh my God. I mean, to be fair, my favorite line that he says is, "Of course I'm going to kill you." Still my favorite line, and like the whole thing of the movie that he says. He has many monologues to this tortured woman. I have to be honest, I had forgotten how long Stephen Ray talks to this woman before he kills her. And he doesn't even kill her. She's the one who gets away. But like, it's days. It is days of like chatting.
Yeah, that's 30% of the torture right there.
Yeah. And
having to just listen to this man.
And I think this also like gave birth to, there was also like the Saw movie, which I think came out relatively around the same time. Okay. Where you had a villain who I think wanted the victim to have a hand in their own destruction. And that's where we get you have to ask for your death. Right.
That weird line at the end where he's like, "I'm not your murderer because you asked for this." I'm like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't, like, and Saw did this too, where they were like, "We don't know if we can call these murders." I was like, you can 100% call these murders. So you put someone in a cage with razor wire and put the key outside of the razor wire and knew that their belly would get cut open. You did this. You did this to them.
You have created the situation that is going to kill them.
That is going to kill them. It is ridiculous that the NY, and again, it's like the NYPD doing weird stuff, which I do think the NYPD does really weird stuff in this movie. And I understand it's supposed to be New York, but like they filmed it in Quebec, and I'm like, I can tell.
Oh, did they? Oh my gosh. I mean, I couldn't tell where it was filmed, but I would not have said New York.
It wasn't filmed in New York at all. It was supposed to be New York. That's why you had like the subway, which, by the way, do you want to talk about the stupid opening death?
Oh my gosh.
We could talk about that for a whole 10 minutes. Like
which I went back and rewatched 3 times because I'd never seen the movie before. And Joy, to your credit, you did try to tell me in advance that there are parts of it that are written or filmed or edited or something to seem kind of nightmarish and dreamlike. So when it, in a really wacky way, shifts from one thing to another thing and there is, in fact, no logic to it, I should just accept that. And you told me this, but I clearly hadn't internalized it. Because when the first person who dies, and I didn't understand why it happened, I then went back and rewatched it 3 times to see if I could figure it out. Because what he does is, okay, he sees a little girl, she's on the subway tracks. He's like, all right, I have to go save the little girl. Fine. He climbs onto the subway tracks. A train is approaching. First of all, he outruns the train for an impressive amount of time. Then he
Who knows how long that was?
Then he flattens himself against the tunnel side of the tracks so that hopefully the train can just kind of like zip by him and then he can cross the tracks and get onto the platform. Except that as soon as he flattens himself against the wall, he looks right, looks left, sees the train is getting closer, and then fully just jumps right in front of it.
Yeah.
He also, kind of makes a sneezy sound as he does it. I don't really know how else to describe the sound he makes, but it kind of sounds like a sneeze.
I literally asked Danielle, I was like, why did you record it 3 times? I need to know, because was it the same reason that I was like, why is this dude dead? Because he should have just stood where he was.
Right. And I thought, maybe he saw the kid and he wanted to, shove her out of the way, but no, that's not what happened. And I don't know.
I will say... He flattens himself against the wall, but as someone who rides the subway pretty frequently, there's flattening yourself against the wall, and then there's actually being in between the wall and the thing, so you are officially away from the tracks. So yeah. I always interpreted it as he realized he didn't have enough room and panicked and tried to jump out of the way of the train, which he should have just stayed where he was.
Should have just stayed where he was. But
I'm with you on that 100%.
I also like that in 2 minutes, his glasses fell off his face no less than 4 times.
I know.
This poor dude.
This poor dude. I think it's a good way to establish. So what the movie does is, at first the movie thinks this is an outbreak of some kind.
Yes, because his eyes are bleeding.
Mm-hmm, because his eyes are bleeding. And I do think this does a good job at establishing strange or odd behavior in somebody who might be a patient zero in a thing and that isn't to say that this is how this happens in real life, but how this happens in movies and films and TV shows this is usually what we see as a nation. But as an audience, this is what we see. And I do think it established that pretty well. And I think that made it make sense for Terry to come on this case, who is played by Natasha, and Natasha is amazing. Terry, the character, is all over the place.
All over the place. Poor her.
She's she's from the Department of Health, but for some reason, I guess, fancies herself a detective. All of a sudden, she's working this case with another NYPD detective, and I'm just like, why are you here? He has a partner.
I do enjoy, there's some really funny moments with her, though. Starting with the fact that she shows up on this scene where they find the German exchange student's girlfriend in the bathtub.
Oh, yeah.
Which is when they call her. And she shows up on the scene, picks up something with a pencil, turns to the detective and says, "Do you have a plastic bag?" And I'm like, "You're the DOH agent. Do you have a plastic bag?" And then proceeds to give him a mini lecture in the car about dust mites. I really liked the dust mites bit.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing of how this revenge happens with this ghost of it's meant to show you your greatest fear, and then that's how you die. Mm-hmm. So I often wondered where he was just I'm not really a fan of insects, and I really also hate germs, super a lot. And I think after he looks at fear.com, he's in that hospital for a while.
Yes.
And I feel there's a moment of when he eventually breaks out of the hospiil, dear listener, where I'm just yeah, that's a thing that you can just do. Sure. Mm-hmm. He breaks out of this hospital, and I had this thought where I was I wonder if it was just it's a fear of dying in a hospital from a terrible, horrible disease,
Oh,
that is
maybe.
But the movie didn't establish any of that and this gets to my other issue. In my research, I found out that they cut a whole lot of this film, and they attributed it to the fact that they had an NC-17 rating, and they didn't want that. They decided to go for an R rating, and they trimmed and trimmed and trimmed, and they got it down to R. Now, even after this movie was released, people were like, this is the goriest film I've seen in a long time. It's violent for no reason. I know, right?
It is violent.
I was kind of suspicious of that because I was just I feel I saw more violent stuff in 1998, but sure. Okay.
It's violent, but it's almost more violent in theory than you actually see on the screen.
I feel it's violent off screen.
Yes, the idea of this serial killer, of Alistair, and what he does is very violent and very scary, but you don't actually see very much of it. I think there's one scene where when he first catches the victim that he spends
Karen.
most of the movie with, Karen. Oh, of course. When he first
That was
catches,
the one where I texted Danielle and I was like, oh no, I'm going to hell, because as soon as he said her name, I started laughing. And I was like, I can't laugh at this woman.
How
She
can
could
you
die.
not? I know. But when he first catches her, it fully pans away and you just look at a fire alarm on the wall while she's screaming and something is happening in the background. You know, it doesn't really show things.
Yeah, this movie, and again, I think the aesthetic of this movie. So there was a phenomenon that happened when, and I'm sure you haven't seen this one, but it's okay. I'm going to talk you through it. So Prometheus is a movie that came out, which is within the Alien franchise.
I did see it.
Did you?
I did. I don't remember anything about it.
I'm not surprised, because the thing that happens with Prometheus is it's meant to be a prequel in the Alien saga, ongoing saga, and it deals with a lot of very interesting things, but the problem is it couldn't pick a storyline by the time they released it. They kept adding to it and they kept subtracting from it, and the editing is all over the place, and the story is like, can't decide. There's a whole theory in the science fiction world and in like real science world of understanding if humans came from alien life.
Right.
Now, this theory it's been around for a while. Sci-fi movies love to play with this theory because it's a lot of fun and it's meaty. You know, like it could be anything. It literally could be anything. And I think that's interesting. But at the same time, you have this Alien movie, which is literally just like when Alien came out, it was a monster movie. That's all it was. It was a monster movie on a spaceship. That's it. And then and then they made a second one where it was still a monster movie, but we got to meet the queen of the monsters. Like
in space.
In space. No one can hear you scream. But like the Prometheus is this weird addition to the franchise, in my opinion, of a thing that is a textbook definition of a director not understanding which direction they want to go in. Mm-hmm. And I think in a much smaller microcosmy way, Fear.com is that same way, because I think Fear.com relies a lot on what the audience is going to perceive as happening. For example, Mike and Terry's relationship is entirely all over the place, and I hated it rewatching it again after so many years of not seeing it.
It is kind of the equivalent of what they do at Alistair, because so much of what they do with him is like he holds up a scalpel menacingly and then nothing happens with the scalpel. He holds up some needles menacingly and then nothing is done with the needles.
Maybe there's a scream as it goes to black.
And maybe you're right. Maybe all of that was cut and it was actually all supposed to be in there. It's really hard to say.
Maybe. But even then, if you trimmed a bunch of stuff to get an R rating, that means the relationships are still a mess.
Yes. You're right. So Mike and Terry were never
are still a mess.
I mean, except for the question of, did Mike and Terry sleep together? Or did they fully clothed? Were they both in her bed fully clothed and he gently stroked her hair because she'd had a terrible day and then she fell asleep? Which of those two things was it?
Danielle did message me with a, did they sleep together? And I don't know, who can say, was my response. It's up to the audience's interpretation. I get mad at it because, and it's not that you could look, anonymous hookups happen all the time. You meet someone, you go on a date, and then, you end up at their place, and then you leave the next morning feeling pretty good about yourself, hopefully, fingers crossed. But This was a professional relationship, which started with her feeling like she had to put her foot down and speak her mind and force her way into the conversation with a cop who was honestly not letting her really get into the conversation. So it started off on a bad foot.
Oh, Joy. We've seen
12
movies.
Hours
That's
later,
how all romantic relationships start.
Enemies to friends.
Enemies to friends.
Enemies to friends to lovers.
Oh, you hate insects? What if I told you were surrounded by insects all the time and you sleep with them?
I did appreciate the sleep with them comment because he was just like, that's not me. And she was like, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's all
it
of
is.
us, buddy.
Well, I love the moment when it actually 180s with them, where you can fill in the pieces for me, because I think they were right in the middle of having a pretty serious conversation, and then she just looks up at him with these big eyes and is like, you have to promise me one thing. You won't visit the site. And then there's this sudden swell of tender piano music, and that's when you're supposed to know that they are romantically inclined,
And
I guess.
And he holds her.
And then, yes, he holds her and strokes her hair. Smash cut to, she's asleep in bed. It pans over, and he's sitting fully clothed in the bed next to her.
I actually, okay, real quick. I don't think, not that our audience cares. Please don't watch this movie. It's not worth it. But
If you want to watch it. We watched it. I watched it.
if you want to watch it, it's fine. Fine.
We won't hold it against you.
We won't hold it against you if you don't bother. I do think he is. I think he's sitting on the side of the bed. I think he's sitting in a chair next to the bed.
Oh, is he?
So that's one.
Okay.
But that doesn't
really
mean
dark.
he wasn't also in the bed making sure she fell asleep a minute ago because a cut. I also, okay, so then let's just get into weird editing, because here we are. There is a moment, I don't know if you went back to, did you go back to watch it? 26 minutes and 10 seconds? Okay.
I did.
So she finds out her boss is dead. And she has this, oh my God, that's Turnbull. I know him. And then it pans to her in a completely different outfit, slamming herself against a wall with like a oh no moment. And I was like, where are we? What are we talking about? What is happening right now? She's not even in Scrubs.
Listen, we can't get into the entire Turnbull thing because we're running out of time, and I'd rather talk about Denise than him. But the only notes I have for the Turnbull death are, in caps, very aggressive cigarette action. Because he really just like jams the cigarette, sticks it places, and he's very aggressive with it. And then dies.
There is, IMDb has a great thing of like goofs and trivia where they're just like, so he has a cigarette in his mouth, and then he doesn't, and then he does, and then it's lit, and then it's not. And I'm like, yeah, so that's where a bunch of cuts happened, right there. And then like he gets in the car and the cigarettes are smoking. Now this is the thing. I think he gets in the car and the cigarettes are smoking because fire in the car.
Yes.
Like, there was a moment where they were like, well, why is the ashtray on fire? And I was like, but see, here is where this kind of story.
There's literally smoke coming out of the vents, and he says his seat is hot. That's why.
Right, exactly. This movie isn't built for a logical brain to watch it. It's just not. It's just not. It exists. It's one of those dreams where a bunch of stuff happens and you kind of, like, maybe you're at a party and then suddenly you're in a jail cell and you don't know why, and your brain's trying to put the pieces together, but it doesn't matter because now you're in jail. Like, it doesn't have an even through line from point A to point B. And I don't know if that's because of the editing. I don't know if that's because there were supposed to be a lot more aggressive things that happened that maybe pushed Terry and Mike closer together. I also don't know why Terry is still here, because Terry is from the Department of Health. And as soon as somebody figured out that it wasn't a virus or a bacteria, she should have been gone.
The person who figured that out is my favorite character.
I know.
Tana Brinkman.
Would you like to talk about Tana?
I mean, there's not a lot to say about her other than I really like her. She's very good at her job. She's very matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And she very quickly establishes that this is not a virus and the DOH agent does not, in fact, need to be here. I feel like, how do you say her name? Tana?
I think it's Tana. I would have to watch the movie again. I don't remember.
Her last name is Brinkman, and she answers the phone as Brinkman. So let's say Brinkman. She's awesome.
Brinkman,
and I would be friends with Brinkman. Just full stop.
Yeah, you would. I would party with her. She seems like she would party a lot. I feel like her and Ancient Farnsworth would get along great.
Oh my gosh,
yeah. Weird days.
It's either her or, oh my gosh, I forgot her name. What's the name of the lab tech from Almost Human that I also fell in love with?
Oh, Margaret? Marjorie? I feel like it's
I
something
know
with an
it's
M.
not Molly, but you kept on comparing her to Molly Hooper, which is why Molly Hooper
I
is
know,
the name that's in
sorry.
my head, but it's not Molly.
Not Molly. Not
Maybe I just
Molly.
have a thing for lab
Mackenzie?
techs. Oh no. Have I found
no.
out?
I know.
Have I
It's
discovered
fine.
live on air?
Listeners, tell us. Tell us what the name was.
Okay. Well, anyway, listen, I feel like the dream quote logic, really the illogics of the movie, are not actually what bothered me about this. Like when it smash cut to different things and I didn't quite understand the connections between them. Like once I got over that hurdle, I guess, which I did after going back and watching this man die 3 times and then deciding, you know what? It doesn't make sense. I'm moving on. I'm letting go. That didn't bother me. It did bother me that Denise, the forensic programmer, the computer expert, is the one accidentally stumbles into this website. Things like that were irritating to me.
Yup. It bothered me also.
Why does she reply to and then engage with a website that is clearly dangerous? At the very least, some really terrible adware is going to be on there. You know, like, do not type into this thing.
I mean, I think it stems from this weird 2002 where, like, we didn't understand the internet. We thought the internet was coming to kill us. Y2K didn't happen, but we were all like, oh my God, Y2K. Like, you know, it was a thing. It was a thing in the zeitgeist of the time.
It really was. Well, see, this is why this movie falls in so well with our Almost Human and Fringe, because in both Almost Human and Fringe, the internet does in fact come to kill you.
Oh my God, it's so true. Why? I mean, I understand that there were and there are sexual predators on the internet. There were and there are people who have gotten into sticky situations because of people that they mistrusted on the internet. I feel like at this point it's happened to all of us where there's a moment where like we got taken in by a thing because we projected onto it and it takes advantage of people who just accept a thing as it is.
Right. You see a yes and no when you click the yes.
Exactly. You see that
also,
like I also kind of like how Jeannie like trolled everybody. Yeah. Jeannie was just like, do you want to hurt me? No, you're lying. Jeannie Richardson, the first troll.
Favorite character in the movie. Movie MVP.
Movie MVP.
Wait,
look, Jeannie Richardson.
I hear what you're saying, and I know that there are predators on the internet. However, Almost Human, Fringe, and this movie are not about predators on the internet. They like isn't the line in this movie? She's out there, alive in the wires. And I was like, what?
Alive in the wires, friends.
She's alive in the wires.
It doesn't.
Oh, it was so great.
I literally wrote down in my notes, the internet is new and scary. I also wrote justice for Denise because I was like, oh boy. I think Denise's biggest fear was all of the information on the internet that she couldn't contain personally. That's why there's all those zeros and ones in her apartment.
Wait, did you clock that there was also a 48 on her wall?
We did. We did clock that there was a 48 on her wall.
So there were zeros and ones all over the walls and also a 48. I was like, no,
48.
Denise would not write 48 on the wall.
I know.
Because if she's writing in zeros and
was
ones,
for
she's
the
writing
audience.
zeros and ones. It doesn't make sense. It's fine.
That one was for the audience. Maybe she thought she was writing zeros and ones.
I guess she's also scared of insects, though, because it really was just like an overwhelming number of cockroaches. I also, you know what? Probably that was the creepiest part of the movie for me, but only because I, in real life, legit don't like cockroaches. So seeing them swarm all over, like even those like human-eating bugs from The Mummy used to freak me out.
Yeah, the scarabs, yeah.
Because there are so many of them and they swarm. But I liked the moment where they're gone and then she looks in the mirror and then all of a sudden they're like coming out of her mouth and everything. That was cool.
I know. I mean, kudos to that actress for holding it together. I do.
She did a good job.
She did a great job. I think all of the bugs actually made me think about, as someone watching this now who is no longer a teenager nor in her 20s, because I would have seen this as a 19-year-old, I think. This would have come out when I was like just freshly 19. So like now knowing what I know about the internet and about computers and about digital information and the zeros and ones and the bugs, I think bugs are the personification of bugs on a computer.
Oh.
Like, I think I think you're more than welcome to be afraid of both, because an actual giant water bug is not some small, tiny cockroach that you can just squish. Mm-hmm. Like a big old water bug or a big old like Mexican cockroaches, which I think was what they had there. And I'm like, we don't have those in Manhattan. Thanks.
And then when they multiplied them by, I don't know, easily 1 million.
500, maybe. I don't know. Like coming down the columns of your apartment. Actually, wait, can we talk real quick about the apartments in this movie? Because if this is supposed to be New York, where like they were living in the village, and I'm like, those apartments don't exist in the village. Where do you have all this space? What is this big giant foyer that we are walking into in the freaking middle of this German exchange student's apartment? Where are you going to school? That it makes sense that you have this giant freaking apartment.
It's funny because that is also in my notes. In my notes, in the section about the German exchange student, it says, this is a big apartment. And with a claw-footed tub, too. Just everything about it.
And I love how they're like artists. And I'm like, I'm sorry, artists in Manhattan cannot afford this apartment. Please and thank you. Like, they have this apartment in the village. And I'm like, that apartment in the village, and apartment in giant quotation marks, is a closet with a shared bathroom down the hall. Like, these things don't exist in the wild. And usually I'm not that person, but then I read that it was like, this was supposed to be New York. And I'm like, where the hell are we?
Was it?
Was it? Was it? Was it movie? I totally curtailed us with talking about the apartments, but that's fine. Oh, yeah. I also, just a couple of random moments from this, I almost said episode. Couple of random moments from this movie. I appreciated that Alistair quotes Stalin for that good communist fear. He quotes Stalin during one of his soliloquies to her.
Oh.
It's like, Stalin said 1 death is a tragedy.
Yes,
and 1 million deaths is a statistic, or whatever the hell he said. And I was like, oh my God.
I missed it. There were so many monologues.
So many monologues. You would be typing the entire thing. I also wrote down, we just met and this is crazy for Mike and Terry, which I thought was pretty funny. I also liked the probably infected moment, where it was just like, shouldn't we be wearing hazmat suits? Oh, we're probably already infected. Thanks. What are you even doing with your time that we're already infected?
Okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, speaking of, because we're just throwing out random lines that we enjoyed and also thought were ridiculous, I think a particularly ridiculous Terry moment, or Mike and Terry moments, are, listen, I know why Mike logged into the website. I know they were trying to make it like, oh, it's this cold case. He was never able to solve it. He just can't stop himself. So sure, he logs into the website to see whether it's the doctor. But then right after that happens, Terry then logs into the website, which I guess she needs to do in order to solve the case. But then, not 5 minutes later, when Jeannie calls her, is yelling at Jeannie on the phone, leave me alone! Leave me alone! And then simultaneously, where are you? And I'm like, you cannot tell the ghost to leave you alone when you are the one who logged onto her website.
Who sought her out.
You went and found her fully aware of the situation and of everything that was going to happen to you. Which, you know what? Maybe it's involuntary. I guess I would be panicking too, and maybe that's the thing that I would have said.
I mean,
but I
maybe...
don't feel that it was a great character moment for her.
Definitely was not. Can confirm, not a great character moment for her. There's also the moment where she does find the dead body.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here going, you guys put this case over to the feds. They make this point over and over again. The feds have that case now. We're not working on the doctor
Justice for
anymore.
Sykes. He makes that point over and over again.
He makes that point over and over and over. And they find the body, and it's not swarming with FBI.
Right.
Also,
when she fully dives into the water, I mean, first of all, that was one of the moments in the movie where I was watching it with my eyes not 2 inches from the screen because I could not tell what was happening or what she was seeing. She
and
pulls
just
this mannequin out of the water.
I know. To fill the listeners in, the director specifically wanted this thing to look like a nightmare, which I know we already mentioned, but I think that's also partially why a lot of the stuff we're looking at, you can't even see what's happening because it's so dark and so panned away. You're just like literally dark. Like I was trying to explain to Danielle, I was like, no, this movie is like literally dark. Like I'm not saying it's a dark film. It's got dark themes. I'm saying it is light-wise dark.
Yes. Like if you thought that one episode of Game of Thrones was terrible, this is worse.
This is worse than that. They don't even have a giant fire with which where sometimes you see their faces. Like I would argue 80% of the movie is just like, what am I even watching? What just happened?
There were frequent moments where I was looking at my own reflection and there was a little bit of light happening in the upper right corner of my TV screen.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. Yes. But yeah, no, she fully dives into the water to get this thing. But then I'm also sitting here going, what a crap detective Mike is and the FBI. Did you not know she was a hemophiliac?
They didn't know anything about her. They clearly didn't interview Mom, because if they interviewed Mom would have told them, A, she's a hemophiliac, and B, she used to go and play in this abandoned steel mill, and maybe you should go check out the abandoned steel mill. I don't know. Seems legit.
Seems legit. I kept writing down, like, Terry really wanted to be a police detective and, like, missed her calling. And I guess that's fine. Like,
she did.
I think what also really bothers me is just this is written by two women. And while I appreciate that horror movies of this ilk are written by women, because I did feel like we saw representation. I felt like we saw a lot more women characters that we might not have seen otherwise. Terry easily could have been a dude.
Yeah, and so could the lab tech, and so could Denise. Yeah. Denise, and the so forensic, could Denise. Something. Granted, the majority of the women that we saw did eventually end up either being tortured or dying and or both.
Yep.
However.
Hashtag Brakeman. Brakeman lives forever. Brakeman is eternal. No,
Karen also survives.
That's true. I mean, and there were also
defying all odds.
There were also other female officers that Mike was referencing. Like, we saw a lot of female representation in this movie. However, it fell into so many weird tropes. Like, I mean, Mike and Terry's relationship is honestly the biggest glaring thing where I'm like, I think, and you and I talked about this before we recorded, and I'm just going to clue the listeners into this one. I feel like this is this weird, bizarro opposite land where we had Pacific Rim, and there were a bunch of us who were like, they're probably going to kiss. I don't know if I want that for them. These are two besties. They totally shouldn't kiss. Like, they are brother and sister. Please don't kiss. Don't kiss. And then at the end of it, they didn't kiss. I feel like this movie is like, we assumed that our audience would assume that they're going to get together. So we just leaned into it real hard. And I'm like, why? They've known each other for like 10 hours?
Very intense 10 hours.
All right, fair. A very intense 10 hours. Her boss dies, which, would mess with anybody.
She just wanted some comfort, Joy. She wanted someone to either gently stroke her hair and or sleep with her. Unclear.
I wish you all could see Danielle's face for that.
Nonetheless, she was comforted. Much like how they continue showing
Is that a
her
play on she persisted? Nevertheless, she just wanted a pillow with which to rest her head.
As if her super cute ginger cat was not enough.
I know.
They showed her cuddling with this cat no less than 4 times, and every time she was next to the cat was basically on top of her and just purring up a storm.
I know.
Such a cute cat.
I know. The cat is the real MVP of this film.
Yes.
I when I was telling Danielle, giving her some fair warning, because I was like, okay, so there's a creepy child. It's a very dark film to see. I don't think it's going to scare you, but just in case, this is what you should prepare yourself for, because I know ghost stories aren't really your thing. So I wanted to kind of put it, and I know a specific brand of ghost stories in particular are not really your thing. And I think this movie did try on a couple of levels to be like an Asian horror movie where maybe not everything is explained, and maybe, you know, like weird stuff just happens and you don't have a reason for it, which is prevalent in Asian horror completely. They're just like, they just accept it. Weird things are happening.
Exactly. Sometimes something scary happens, and the reason something scary happened is because the filmmaker decided that something scary should happen.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
And it's not explained, and it's just weird and creepy, and now you're just weird and creeped out, and you don't really know why, and you don't have a good explanation.
I mean, thankfully the cat lives, because if anything had happened to that cat, that's what I would have, that's the warning I would have needed up front, you know?
Yeah.
Just fair warning, there's a cat, it dies. But this cat does not die, it lives, it is wonderful and beautiful.
The cat is in the last scene of this movie.
I'm a little bit annoyed, speaking of tropes the movie falls into, that they've basically put the cat there because the cat is code for Terry lives alone and is a lonely person.
Yeah,
Which I don't love.
hate that trope. I also hate that trope. Like, what if you're an animal lover and you just love cats and it has nothing to do with
What if cats are just super awesome little purr machines who cuddle next to you and you
regardless of your relationship status? Like, it's so weird.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well,
I don't like it. I don't like that it's that it happens so often. I don't like that 2 women wrote that into the story.
That's fair.
But again,
that's fair.
Again, the representation, I am having my own come to Jesus in this year of our Lord 2021, where I'm just like, I am going to take the representation where it happens.
Yeah.
And we are not, like, representation just means representation. It doesn't mean it's good representation.
It isn't always. And I will say for this movie, because I did point out that many of the women on screen are tortured or die, I think just as many men die as women in this movie.
I feel like this is also true.
Because at least...
I mean, we have the German guy and we have
Sykes. Five of them die. The German guy, Sykes, Mike, Turnbull, Alistair.
God, I forgot about Mike. Oh, yeah, that's true. Alistair dies. I mean, like, the revenge arc actually happens. Although Danielle and I are in agreement that the death was not enough.
Yeah, no, I wanted him to be just trapped in this eternal torture loop with the women that he maligned, you know? That would have been awesome. And I feel like they kind of set up the scene like that because Jeannie was there in all of her glory, and then there were the women who were kind of hanging on the walls, and I thought maybe they would come off the walls and join in the sequence, and they did not.
I mean, we had to wait until we really had a movie like Death Proof and like Atomic Blonde, where we could actually have women actually fighting men, like fist fighting men. And like, that's fine. But I'm also just like, I would have been super here for this ghost just being like, here's all my rage down your throat. And instead we got this weird out of body experience. And I was like, it was all right. It was not great.
Yeah, and then he just kind of, I can't even really tell what happens to him at the end. He either gets ripped into tiny bits or bursts into bugs. One of the above.
I mean, all of this happens in his head, first of all.
Yes.
Like, every hardship he gets at the end of this movie is the thing that happens in his head. And I'm like, fine, but also be clearer about the way you destroyed this man for a being that has sought nothing but vengeance for what feels like more than 9 months. Because Mike makes the comment that it's been 9 months that the doctor has been messing with him, and Jeannie was the first victim. So I don't even know when Jeannie died.
Right.
Like, it could be a year ago. You know, like, I don't know.
There was still flesh on the body, and the body was underwater. So
this is also true.
Not
the
that
timeline.
that we shouldn't be applying logic to this movie, but if we were applying logic to this movie, that would mean it wasn't like a decade ago that she died. It was also more recent.
Yeah,
than that.
This is also true. I think the movie tries. The reason I like this movie and the reason I suggested it is because I like what the movie puts forward as a concept. I don't think it executes the concept particularly well. I think something like, I know we've referenced it in this very episode, but like something like Dark City executes its own plotline extremely well, and it has all its ideas very well thought out, and it invites you into this noir, surreal, whatever the hell is happening, and you're just here for the ride. This movie takes you on a ride that you're not necessarily interested in because it doesn't have a direction. And I think that's where it falls flat. I enjoy what the movie represents, and I will totally watch this movie again. Like, I literally, for this podcast, I purchased it on Amazon so that I could literally watch it wherever I was. I'd be like, hey, I've got that on Amazon Video. Anybody want to watch the thing? But like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Editing wise, it could have been better. But I think the movie in general doesn't deserve the harsh criticism it had before. And like you said, it's not great. It's not terrible. It exists.
It exists. I don't feel as if I wasted the hour and 45 minutes of my life that I spent on it.
And that's the best I can hope for when I recommend a movie. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the best. That's the worst case scenario I'm hoping for
worst
every
case
time.
Scenario.
Worst case scenario, you're like, I didn't waste my time watching this. And I'm like, great.
Didn't waste my time. And you know what? If you want to watch it on a random Tuesday night, 1 week, Joy, I would watch this again.
I feel like I should show it to our movie club and just be like, here's a weird one. Let's just watch it.
Give them the Alistair disclaimer up front and then show it.
And then show it. Alistair's going to talk a lot. We don't want him to talk, but it's fine. He's gonna say a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that's the movie, and these are going to be our movie nights going forward, just alternating weeks for season 2. And next week, be sure to tune in to our next episode of Fringe.
We hope you enjoy the movie nights. We're certainly going to. We would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, what's your favorite B-grade horror movie? How's that? How's your favorite B-grade horror movie? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/BockPod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones. Tell the vengeful spirits in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.